On a quiet Ohio street, two kids shared bicycles, baseball cards, and summers that never seemed to end. Years later, in a fluorescent hospital hallway, my phone buzzed, and everything I had carefully compartmentalized began to loosen. If you have ever loved a friend, breathe with me. Right now, gently, like, subscribe, and share to support stories like this. Comment your experience and ring the bell for compassionate updates today. Hey, friend, thank you for being here. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. I'm going to walk you through this story the way I would walk a patient through a difficult diagnosis, carefully, kindly, and with full respect for the way the heart can be both stubborn and wise. I want to tell you about Michael, my childhood friend from Maplewood, Ohio, and about how I learned to say a sentence out loud that I had been whispering into my pillow for years. I am in love with my childhood friend. If you're listening late at night with the lamp on low, or during a morning commute when the sky is mussed with clouds, I'll keep the pace steady. No rush. These things live in the quieter rooms of our lives, and they deserve time. Maplewood is the kind of place where summer cicadas form a chorus, and the wind moves through the maple trees like a sigh. My mother was a nurse at the community clinic, all gentle eyes and practical hands. My dad sold hardware and could fix almost anything with a patient shrug. Michael lived 3 houses down, past the mailbox that leaned like it was listening in on conversations. He had a gap between his front teeth and a laugh that showed it proudly, like the world should be grateful for imperfections. We met because our bikes bumped. I was 8, maybe 9, coming around the corner too fast, my front tire sliding on loose gravel. He was cutting through the cul-de-sac, standing on his pedals like a superhero. We collided in an awkward, clattering embrace of spokes and scuffed knees. He popped up laughing, and I remember his first words to me as if they were written in chalk on my driveway. "You okay?" It was kindness, simple and quick. We picked up our bikes, and from then on, our days braided together like shoelaces tied tightly for a race. We collected baseball cards we couldn't afford and swapped them until we were both sure we'd won. We built ramps from plywood and dared each other into improbable flights. There's a picture somewhere of us under the elm tree, holding mango popsicles, our faces lit with orange optimism. Childhood was a room with wide windows, and friendship made the light look brighter. As we got older, the games changed, but the chorus stayed the same. We did algebra homework at the kitchen table, whispering jokes while my mom cooked spaghetti. We tried out for the high school baseball team. He made varsity. I didn't. He bought me milkshakes anyway and said my hands were steady enough to be a surgeon. It was the first time anyone told me I could hold a life in my hands and not shake. Teenage years layered on small secrets and big questions. I remember trying to name a certain quiet ache without letting it out into the open air. I was careful, the way you cup a candle against the wind. Michael dated a girl named Jenna for a few months and then a girl named Carly for a few weeks. I dated no one. I was patient with myself the way I would later be patient with a person learning to walk again. I told myself, the diagnosis is not urgency. It's curiosity. Keep asking. Keep listening. I went to Boston for college. It felt like I had taken that childhood bike and pedaled all the way east. I worked part-time at a hospital as a unit clerk. I played piano in a chapel after rounds when the sun lowered itself down the side of the buildings and the city exhaled. I called home every Sunday. I called Michael most Fridays. The calls were about everything and nothing. He stayed in Ohio for a while and then finished his degree in education at a state school a few hours from Maplewood. The details seemed to matter, but underneath them there was a warm current I rarely named: safety. He sounded like home. Medical school came for me, with its bright pages and bleary nights. I loved the way anatomy felt like learning a language our bodies had been speaking to us all along. I loved how a quiet room could transform with a good question, and how sometimes what helped most was presence, not fixing. In the first year of my residency, I learned the rhythms of morning rounds and the taste of bad coffee at midnight. I learned to sit with grief without filling the silence too quickly. I learned to tell the truth gently, and sometimes that was the hardest thing. Michael, meanwhile, became Mr. Lawson, the favorite history teacher at Maplewood High, with a classroom full of black and white photos and a shelf of board games for rainy days. He coached JV baseball and knew which kid needed a joke and which kid needed a look that meant "I see you." He rented a little house with a porch swing just a few blocks from where we grew up. He fixed his own leaky faucet and mastered the art of making pancakes on Sunday mornings, even though he once set off the smoke detector and had to wave a dish. Towel around like a flag surrendering to breakfast. Through our 20s, we drifted toward and away from each other like two people walking the same street at different times of day. We missed each other sometimes by hours. When we did meet, holidays, weddings, brief trips, the conversations were easy, like stretching into a familiar jacket. There was a moment at our friend Eric's wedding in Cleveland when we stood just outside the banquet hall doors, listening to the muffled thump of the DJ and the laughter pouring out like warm light. He slipped off his tie, leaned against the hallway wall, and looked at me as if about to ask a question he wasn't sure how to phrase. But he didn't ask it, and I didn't answer it. Instead, I clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You clean up good." He laughed. We went back inside. Sometimes love sits dutifully in the second row, hands folded, waiting to be called. Years later, around the time my hair started to discover a strand or two of gray near my temple, my phone buzzed in the resident lounge. It was a message from Michael's sister, Sarah. Dad had a stroke. "He's in the ICU at St. Luke's. Michael asked if you could call." I can still hear the hiss of the vending machine and the hum of fluorescent lights. I can still feel the thick, quiet weight of that message. Your body remembers certain doors opening. When I called, Michael's voice was uneven but steady in the way a bridge can sway and still hold. He told me about his dad, Mr. Lawson to me, the man who taught us how to throw a curveball, and about the left-sided weakness, the slurred speech. He said the word aphasia carefully, as if he had practiced it. He said, "I could use you here if you can come. Not as a doctor, as my friend." I looked at my schedule, the calendar squares full of names and tests and obligations. I thought of the early morning bus stop where his dad would wave at us with a thermos in his hand. I heard my mother's voice in my head, practical and loving. "When someone asks for your presence, that is care you can give." I swapped shifts. My attending shook my hand and said, "Go. Family matters." It was one of those sentences that fold a friend into the category of kin with quiet certainty. I took a late flight to Ohio and landed in a sky smeared with winter. At St. Luke's, the elevator ride to the ICU felt like a long inhale before a necessary conversation. I stepped out, and there he was, Michael in jeans, a hoodie, and the same gap-toothed smile, dulled at the edges but intact. We hugged the way men often do, firm, brief, and then we didn't let go right away. He exhaled against my shoulder, and that's when I realized that my own shoulders had been living up near my ears. I let them drop. He said thank you into the cotton of my jacket. In the ICU, his dad dozed, his face softened by the sedation, his right hand still calloused from yard work. I explained what I could, slowly, like I was laying out a map someone could trace with a finger. I pointed to the bright, neat letters of medical jargon, and then translated them back into a language the heart could hear. Michael listened, his brow doing that thoughtful furrow it had always done in school when a teacher asked something unexpected. "It's not your fault," I said, and he nodded, the way a person nods when a sentence is both the thing they most need and the thing they least trust. We took turns staying with his dad. We walked laps around the unit. We drank coffee that tasted like brown paper. We became our old selves and the new ones we were still learning at the same time. In the quiet moments, when the machines had settled into their own predictable chatter, I watched Michael tuck a blanket around his father with a gentleness so practiced it felt like a second language. "This is a thing I want you to know. Love teaches competence. The more you love, the more skillful your care becomes." I could feel it there, humming between us, strong and patient. Not youthful in the jittery sense, but mature in the way an oak holds itself. After a few days, when his dad stabilized and transferred to a step-down unit, the crisis softened. We took a breath. Sarah went home to sleep in her own bed. Michael said, "Come outside with me." We stood in the chilly parking lot, the exhaust of our breath visible, the sky low. He said, "Do you remember the 4th of July when we tried to see how many fireflies it would take to light the whole backyard?" I smiled. Of course I remembered. We'd cupped them in our hands, opened our fingers, and watched the soft green punctuation marks float away. "I've been thinking about that," he said. "About tiny lights that only make sense when they're together." We went for pancakes at a diner with blue vinyl booths and coffee mugs that fit your hands just right. He told me about his life, the students he worried about, the loneliness he didn't always admit to, the way he had almost gotten engaged 3 years back and then felt something inside him refuse the future, like a body refusing a medication. He asked me about Boston, about my patience, about the nights I stayed late just to sit with someone whose family couldn't get there in time. I told him everything and not enough. I told him the truth in the way a person does when they are trying to remember how to speak in their first language. There was a moment, our plates mostly crumbs, syrup smears like small constellations, when his fingers brushed mine, reaching for the check. The contact was brief, the kind most friends would not notice at all, but my body felt it like the smallest, clearest bell. It said, "You are here." It said, "You are alive." The lesson I teach patients about noticing your breath and your heartbeat. I taught it to myself, right there in a booth that had seen countless refills and confessions. We do not have to rush. We can stay attentive to the gentle signals. In the days that followed, I helped get a care plan in place for his dad, walked his mother through medication charts, showed her how to log blood pressure readings. I spoke slowly, not because she didn't understand, but because the information deserved room to settle without frightening anyone. Michael watched me with that gaze he has that makes you believe you're doing something brave, even when you're just doing what you know how to do. At night on his porch swing, we'd sit in our coats, our knees aligned like parentheses around a sentence we hadn't read yet. He'd ask questions. "Do you ever feel like you're late to your own life?" And I'd answer like a doctor who knows the body's rhythms vary. "I think there's more than one right time." Then, one evening, as the streetlight turned the sidewalk into a sheet of light and the neighborhood dogs offered their opinions on squirrels, he turned to me and said, without flourish, "Can I tell you something?" He waited. I nodded. "I've been thinking about us like that," he said, the last 2 words landing gently, but with a weight that redistributed everything on the shelf of my chest. There was a long pause, not awkward, more like a held note. I smiled, a small involuntary curve, and felt tears prick without falling. "Me too," I said. I said it calmly. It felt like putting a stethoscope to my own sternum and hearing a rhythm settle into steadiness. We didn't kiss then. We didn't rush to rename it. We let the truth be a soft animal that came out of the woods to eat from our hands. We talked about practicalities the way you do when your training is to care, how this would work with distance, what it might mean for his job, for my schedule, for our families. I told him I wouldn't ask him to be braver than was safe in our hometown. He told me he didn't want to pretend. We sat with the tension, not as an emergency, but as a knot a patient hand could work loose. The next day, we told his mother, gently at the kitchen table where we'd once done algebra, our voices careful. She studied our faces, then took her glasses off and rubbed the bridge of her nose. A gesture I recognized from every time she'd looked at a bill or a recipe or the weather forecast and recalibrated. She asked if we were safe. We said yes. She asked if we were happy. We said we were trying to be honest, and that happiness felt like a new room we were building one piece at a time. She nodded. She said, "I always wondered if you'd find your way back to each other." Then she squeezed my hand, motherly and certain, and put a plate of sliced apples in front of us like a benediction. Generations learn, sometimes slowly, sometimes right on time. Our first kiss happened a week later after a storm. The power flickered and the house took a deep breath and sighed into quiet. We lit candles. The room smelled faintly of rain and something sweet from the kitchen drawer. He looked at me with that teetering smile that had been part of my life longer than my own professional title. I reached up and he met me halfway. It was not fireworks. It was not sudden wings. It was the steady aligning of something that had been waiting for permission to be called by its right name. If you need to know, it was brief, gentle, and it told the truth. In the morning, the lights came back on, the coffee maker blinked, and the world was the same and not. I returned to Boston for work, And we built a life between cities with the care of people assembling a bridge they plan to cross often. We texted like teenagers and wrote actual letters like people who understand that paper can hold something sacred. We scheduled calls as if they were appointments we wouldn't dare miss. When a patient broke down in my exam room and I needed to hold it together and then let it go, I'd call him on my walk home and he'd say, "Describe the sky to me." And I would. When a student of his hit a home run for the first time, he'd send me a video that was mostly the grass and the sound of him yelling with joy, and I'd grin in the middle of a busy Boston street like someone who'd just remembered how to dance. There were hard parts. That's important to say. Love does not exempt you from the friction of calendars and the tremors of old fear. There were weekends when a last-minute page kept me in the hospital. There were school events he couldn't skip. There were reunions in airport terminals and goodbyes in rideshare lines. There was the old worry, what will people think? What will this cost? That lives like a small echo in the rib cage. When those questions came up, we did what I tell patients in the middle of panic. Orient to what is real. We named 5 things around us. We said what we could see, hear, smell, and touch. We said we can do the next right thing. Then we did. We told people slowly, and we did it in ways that felt humane. I told my parents on a sunny Saturday afternoon, sitting at their kitchen table, where the clock ticked like a gentle metronome, and the smell of cinnamon softened the corners of the room. My mother looked like she'd been holding that part of her breath and finally let it out. My father took a longer route toward his acceptance, but he arrived. He asked practical questions about how we'd handle moving, mortgages, insurance, and holidays. It was his language of care. He put an extra coat of paint on the picket fence the next time he visited my house, as if to say, "I am making this place a little stronger for you," Michael told his sister, who hugged him so hard they both nearly tipped off the couch. He told a couple close friends, who said the kind of things you can only say when you truly know someone. His classroom stayed his sanctuary. His baseball team learned they could tease him about everything in the world except this, the way a team knows what not to touch because it's sacred. We planned small rituals, because rituals make a life. On Sunday nights, we'd cook the simplest dinners, crack eggs into a skillet, fold them with cheese, and call it good. On Tuesday afternoons, we'd send each other a photograph of our shoes, a silly shorthand for "How are you standing today?" When we were together in Boston, we walked along the Charles River and counted dogs. We went to the art museum and stood in front of a painting with a field of blue and pretended to be experts, while secretly just enjoying the company. In Ohio, we went to the diner with the blue booths again, and always split a slice of pecan pie because that's what the heart remembers. When his dad learned to say our names again, slowly, carefully, like stepping stones across a creek, he looked at us and gave a small nod that said more than sentences. His mother started saving 2 mugs for mornings. My hospital badge became just something I wore, not a shield. We adopted a dog together, a rescue with cautious eyes who learned over months that a raised hand can mean "let me pet you," and that a front door opening can mean "come with us, you are home." We named him Scout. He took to curling at our feet like a comma, letting our thoughts rest. Eventually, we made a plan we could both live with. Michael applied for a teaching job in the Boston area. The process took months, each step an exercise in patience and hope. I switched to a clinic schedule that gave me evenings more often. It wasn't glamorous. It was steady. We found a little apartment with windows that caught the morning light, and a kitchen just big enough for 2 people to bump into each other without apology. We learned the habits of each other's mornings and the softness of each other's fatigue. We were not perfect. We were kind. There were nights we were both too tired to talk. There were weekends we did laundry and called that an accomplishment. There were apologies offered without drama, forgiveness given with closed eyes and a long exhale. I want to pause here and speak directly to anyone who has loved a friend quietly, in the way you tuck a note into a book and hope you'll find it when you most need it. Your heart is not a problem to solve. It is a messenger. If you feel fear, that does not mean you are wrong. It means you are near something true. If you have to move slowly, move slowly. If you need help, seek it. There is courage in telling your story to someone who can hold it gently. And if your story cannot be spoken safely yet, that is not a failure. That is wisdom. Safety is not cowardice. It is care. In the early fall of the year Michael moved, we went back to Maplewood for the high school's homecoming game. The field lights came on like second suns. The bleachers were familiar. The air smelled like popcorn and grass and a little nostalgia. We sat side by side, our shoulders touching, and watched teenagers run like daylight across a field. A few people squinted at us the way people do when they're rearranging what they thought they knew. Some smiled. Some looked away. Most just lived their evening. The band played, and the drums did that thrilling thing to your chest. I leaned in and said to Michael, "Do you want to walk by the old elm tree?" He grinned and said, "Lead the way." We walked the route we'd walked 1,000 times. Past the mailbox that still leaned, past the house where Mrs. D'Amico used to hand out the best Halloween candy, past the street where we had both learned to look both ways. We stood under the elm. It was taller, which is only to say, time had kept doing what it does. He said, "I think about us as kids a lot." I said, "Me too." Then he added, "I don't think I loved you like this then. I think I loved you the way a person loves a place that always has a light on in the window." I nodded, because that's exactly it. We aren't rewriting our childhood. We are letting it be the foundation for a house we are building now. Before we left town, we stopped at the hospital to visit his dad. He was in rehab, working on pronunciation, on strength, on patience. Michael's mother hugged us, her eyes a little watery in the corner the way all mothers get when too much of the world arrives at once. When we said goodbye, Mr. Lawson looked at Michael, then at me, and said, halting but clear, "My boys." It was one of the few times I nearly cried in a hospital for myself. We held it together with the practice of people who've learned how to lean without falling. Back in Boston, I still sometimes woke at 3 in the morning with a worry whispering at me about the future. I'd slip out of bed, sit at the kitchen table, and write it down, the way I instruct patients to put their anxiety on paper so it stops running laps in the mind. Michael would pad out on quiet feet and put a mug of tea in front of me and touch the back of my neck with his warm palm, not to fix anything but to accompany me while the worry burned off. He learned how to make the tea exactly the way I forget I like it when I'm tired. Too much honey, a little lemon, the comfort of sweetness when the night insists it's longer than it is. We learned each other's medical histories and stories the way couples do, with tenderness and humor. He learned my allergy to cats. I learned his fear of getting stuck on a broken escalator, which I teased him about until the day we actually got stuck on a broken escalator, and he was braver than I was. We went to a therapist for a few sessions, not because we were in crisis, but because we wanted to learn how to talk well before we needed to. We learned the difference between "you always" and "I feel." We learned to ask, "Do you want comfort or solutions?" That question saved us the way the right medication can save a morning. If your instinct is to ask, "Was it worth the risk?" I want to answer slowly, because the question deserves a thoughtful answer. It was worth it because naming our love didn't erase our friendship. It deepened it. It was worth it because I stopped living in the waiting room of my own life. It was worth it because, on a Tuesday in February, with snow yarding itself into clumsy piles along the curb, we bought groceries together and laughed at the fact that we always forget paper towels, and something about that ordinary moment felt like a profound diagnosis of well-being. What is health? Sometimes it's the ability to do the simple things with someone who sees you. On our first anniversary of deciding to try, we went back to that diner, found the same blue booth, and slid in like we were stepping into a familiar song. We ordered what we always order because some constants are comforting, and we held hands on top of the table because we could. I told him I loved him. He said it back. It still surprises me sometimes that such simple words can change the architecture of a day. It's like the difference between a waiting room and a living room. You can feel the chairs relax. I don't know how your story will end. I don't even fully know how ours will. We're not done. We're somewhere in the middle. And in the middle is where most life happens. We'll have other hard seasons. We'll have losses. We'll have days when the car won't start and the dog eats something he shouldn't and the email pings too many times. But I trust us the way I trust the body to heal when you give it rest and care and time. We are learning how to check in with each other like I check a pulse, gently, attentively, with the knowledge that what I feel under my fingers is not a perfect metronome but a living rhythm. If you're listening to this and you are carrying love for a friend like a folded letter in your back pocket, This is me, the man who once timed his world by hospital monitors, telling you that your heart can hold both fear and hope and still do its work. There is a difference between reckless and brave. Brave is informed. Brave is accompanied. Brave checks the exits and still walks forward. Brave asks for help. Brave knows that you cannot control other people's reactions and still chooses to tell the truth when it's time. On a recent Sunday morning, we took Scout to the park. The sun was doing that merciful thing it does after a long winter, showing up early and hanging around. Michael threw a tennis ball with that same easy arm that used to throw curveballs in summer leagues. I watched him run after the dog, slip, catch his balance, and grin at me like we'd been doing this forever. I felt the quiet arrive in my chest, the kind that has no panic in it. We walked home along the river. A rower sliced the water and left a silver seam behind. The city was out. The world, for a moment, felt recalibrated to a kinder setting. At the crosswalk, he reached for my hand. It was a small gesture. We've made it 1,000 times by now. A woman in a red coat waited with us. She looked at our hands and then at our faces and smiled, quick and kind. The light changed. We crossed. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's different, but in that moment it was simple. If you have lived long enough to know that simplicity can feel like a miracle, you'll understand why I am grateful for every step. We still ride bikes sometimes, because nostalgia can be a healthy vitamin if you use it right. We still make pancakes and set off the smoke detector now and then. We still visit Maplewood, and the mailbox still leans, and the elm tree still stands like an old friend who has kept the watch. We still sit on a porch swing, now ours, and ask each other the sorts of questions that make a person feel accompanied. How's your heart? What feels heavy? What feels light? What do you want to let go of? Who can we call? There is a quiet celebration in our home that isn't about confetti or announcements. It's about the facts. 2 mugs on the counter, a dog asleep by the door, a schedule on the fridge with messy notes about appointments and dinners and student conferences and clinic days, and the knowledge that we get to do this all on purpose, together. Love, at least this kind, feels like the good version of a diagnosis. A name for something that has been true for a long time, followed by a plan that is kind to everyone involved. I want to tell you one more story, quick and small. A few months ago, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kaplan, slipped on the ice outside our building. We heard her exclaim through the window, and we ran down, 2 men in 2 mismatched coats, to help her up. I held her elbow, checked for tenderness, tested her ankle gently. Michael ran inside for a chair. We settled her, made her tea, called her daughter, and stayed until the color came back to her cheeks. As we were leaving, she looked at us and said, "You boys take care of each other, don't you?" It wasn't a question. We nodded. It felt like the whole story distilled to the simplest instruction. Take care of each other. If you're sitting with your own story now, perhaps with the disk of your phone warm in your hand or your laptop humming softly on your knees, I hope a few things for you. I hope you have at least one person who will sit with you and listen without needing to fix anything. I hope you have moments of safety where your shoulders can settle. I hope you find language that makes you feel less alone in your own life. And I hope, when the time is right, whatever that means for you, you get to speak the truth you've been carrying, not because the world is guaranteed to applaud, but because so often, truth is the beginning of the gentlest kind of healing. We came here, you and I, to talk about being in love with a childhood friend. I am. It is both a simple sentence and a wilderness. It is both the baseball cards and the ICU, both the diner with blue booths and the kitchen with a kettle whistling, both Ohio and Boston, both the boy with skinned knees and the man with a stethoscope and a key to a shared front door. It is ordinary and wild, patient and irrepressible, original and ancient. It is a 1-syllable word that asks me daily to choose steadiness over spectacle. Us. Tonight, when we turn off the lights, we'll do the little household dance we've learned. He'll check the locks. I'll set the coffee. Scout will circle 3 times and land with a sigh at our feet. One of us will say, "Tomorrow's early," and the other will say, "I know," and we'll both mean, we're in it together. In the morning, we'll wake and we'll make the bed, not because anyone will see it, but because rituals matter. He'll kiss my cheek. I'll squeeze his hand. We'll step into a world that needs what we have: attention, kindness, patience, and an unflashy willingness to show up. If you were my patient, I would tell you that your heart can survive telling the truth. If you were my student, I would tell you that courage is a muscle you build with repetitions. If you were my friend, and maybe you are, through the miracle of this shared listening, I would tell you that I believe in a version of love that makes us more ourselves and more available to the people who count on us. That's what Michael and I are practicing, on purpose, day by day. So yes, I am in love with my childhood friend. It's not a headline. It's a life. I wish for you a life that feels like that sentence, true, measured, and freeing. When you get there, or if you're there already, call it by its name. Make a plan that is kind, hold a hand if it's safe to do so, and let yourself be seen by the people who will love you more, not less, for it. Take another breath with me. In, out. The body knows what to do. The heart does too. And somewhere in Ohio, under an elm that has watched a couple of boys learn how to be men, and somewhere in Boston, where rivers keep their own time and hospitals hum like faithful engines of care, that truth keeps going. Love is here. It's patient and it's learning every day how to stay.